Hey guys, welcome back to another video here working on the 60 series. Last episode, we got the front diff out, we put the bump stops in, we converted it to flip radius arms, and we braced it up. I've since straightened it and it's ready to go back in. I've put a bit of weld on all the mounts here so that when we do get it back in, I can put some shocks in and all the mounts aren't gonna sort of break off. I have put a bit of weld through some of the falling brackets here that were really lightly tacked, so that can take a bit of load later on. And we got the rear diff here braced and straightened, and I've since obviously, thrown it back in the chassis, ready to get the rear shock mounts and bump stops done on it. So hopefully this episode, we can get the rear bump stops on, both shocks on each side done, and that'll be that. So then we can put some wheels on it, we can finally lose these posts holding it up, we can throw the cab on and flex it up. So this is a really exciting episode. Hopefully by the end of this video, it'll be on its wheels, we're able to push it around, it'll have steering. So I'm really excited because it's gonna be a really big motivator to get through and start knocking off some of these jobs. At the moment, it's pretty hard to come out here, it's 9:30, I've just got to the workshop, and I've spent hours and hours on this, and every time I leave, it kind of looks the same. So having something with like a big visual change will be really motivating and help me sort of start on those next wave of jobs. So I'm super excited. So stick around and we'll see how these rear shocks go together. Okay, so the rear diff's in, and we've already sort of got these brackets, this one here that runs right through, and then these two on the back. So that's where one shock mount will go, and the other shock mount will go from this plate across to this lower control arm mount. That'll be our two. So they're already sort of pre-done. We have got some little keyways in the chassis here for our little bump stop mounts, and then the towers are there too. I've got a nice pile of parts already cut and prepped, so if it all works out like I showed on the computer, this will go together pretty quickly, I think. As usual, I've got my laser set up here. We've got our center line. You can see we're on the mark, on the center line there, running right through the car there. We're on the center of the diff here. I've checked the wheelbase back to this square line on the ground here. Wheelbase is square this way, and I've also set the pinion angle. So now when we do all our shock mounts and stuff on here, everything's gonna be bang on. All right, so first lower shock mount. This is it. I've got washers in there to pretend that that's the spacing of the coilover, and he just sort of clips in on there. All right, so I got the rear shock mounts all tacked to the diff. That went pretty straightforward. Now I'm sweating it up. It's about 1 billion degrees in here, but I don't want to open the roller door because there's a swarm of about 1,000 bugs out there trying to get in. So we've just got to deal with it. Now I'm on to doing the towers on the chassis. Right. I've already got the towers cut and folded. So this is the tower. And then got these rectangles, I've got to put a fold in them, and that'll be sort of like, if you can imagine, like a lid. So I've got these plates, which have got, the mounts for the two shocks in them, and they'll sort of go under that lid that I just showed you, like that. One there, and then one behind it. It will be a bit tricky to get the nut on, which I'm a bit unsure about, but it's the easiest way I could come up with to getting nuts and bolts to work well when this is all got to be filled in with like a wheel arch body for the 60. So I didn't want to have to get in the back here to get to a nut or have them going this way, because then the really long bolt would have to sort of come out the front here, and that the body's going to hug this. So this way we can just come out, which will be the outside of the car. So I'll tack these together. I won't fully weld them or anything because obviously there might need to be changes, but I'll tack them together. I'll sit them on the chassis. I'll jack the diff right up to full bump, and then we can throw some shocks in and sort of see how we're looking. I might need to shorten this up a little bit, or there might be a few clearance issues, whatever, but we'll check them out and see how we go. Here's the front diff, patiently waiting to be thrown back in, all nice and straightened up. Now that it's all been braced, you can see how nice and long the knuckle ball gussets are. They go past the radius arm mount, sort of where it overlaps, because that's always sort of a bit of a weak point. It's obviously not super strong, but it's just enough to help. But this is definitely the weakest part. But she's nice and strong now. Both sides, ready to go. All right, so what I'm just trying to work out is how I'm gonna go about tacking this tower together. So I've got like this plate, which has got a whole bunch of washers on it to set the spacing again, just like we did on the rear shock, just like we did on the rear diff there for the lower shock mounts. But I'm thinking I might need to clamp these together, tack them to that sort of top lid piece, like this thing, then tack it to the tower, check it works, and then remove this with these tacked to it so I can get in and fully weld them, because it's gonna be nearly impossible to weld this back one once it's all sort of in there. And then if I need to make any changes, it'll have to come apart anyway, which isn't the end of the world. But I just don't want to sort of rush this, throw a few tacks on it, and then realize it can't actually be built. So I'm just sort of trying to figure that out at the moment. But you can see I've got this one here sort of sitting together. So my theory now is I'll put another bolt through this hole. But then if I drop this in here, we should be safe, I hope. But I'll have to wait and see. Hopefully that's how it goes together. I just got to get some more washers.
A little keyway here on the chassis, so I know that's sort of where it goes.
I'll still double check it off my lasers to make sure it's in the right spot when I do, both left and right, to make sure they're the same. But that's a pretty good start to sort of help us get it in the right spot. And you can see I've already got one bump stop mount tacked on. All right, so first problem is I forgot I had to change this to a 90-degree fitting. I just actually had these shocks apart with Nick and we revalved the shocks and I forgot to do that, so that's annoying. So I'll have to change these hoses because although it doesn't actually hit, it's just a bit annoying. It would be nicer if it was a 90 or at least a 45 so I could deal with this stupid thing. I wouldn't mind actually just putting a hard fitting and having it another piggyback like this guy, but that's a problem for another day. The good news is both shocks are in. We've got a little bit of clearance around the back there to the chassis. Our coil slider, which is in theory the size of a coil or a little bit bigger, he clears everything. It is close in there, but we're good, I think. So that's nice. Bit of clearance around all the joints, which is good. Yeah, so that's a good first test fit. Now, the scary part is jacking it all the way up to full bump and hoping none of the tacks break as we sort of increase. I just dropped some of the gas out of this shock because there was so much downforce, I couldn't actually jack it up. It was starting to lift the back of the chassis off the ground. So I might let a bit of gas out of the coilover as well, just to make it a bit easier. And then I'll jack it all the way up and I'll add the packer for full bump and see where we're at. Well, that's it at full bump. And we've got a little bit of that shaft left. This shaft is about bottomed out. And would you believe it? Nothing hits. How good. Look at that. Our pretend coilover. Coil is free. There's room all the way around this shock. The only thing that's going to be a bit shit is getting up in there to the rebound bypass tube adjuster, but hopefully we don't need to do that, too often. It's not a race car. Once we get it set and comfy, we'll be good. So I've got to put the other one of these together, tack it to that side, maybe do a little bit more welding than what's on this one, and then I'll add a bit of weld to this one. And I think we're pretty much right to throw some wheels on it. Back working on the chassis. In my lunch break today, I put this other tower on using the laser, squared it up, copying the other one so I know it was in the right spot. That one's actually been welded fully out before I put it together. So then I just had to go ahead and weld out the first tower I put on there, and both towers are then done. So both the towers are welded on now. There's a bit of weld on those bottom mounts. And you'll see I've started the bump stop mount, but what I want to do is I want to just now get the diff in with the shocks, get this diff back in as well. I've got it down here, just got to throw it in with some radius arms, put those shocks in, get it all on wheels, lose these posts and roll it out here and put the body on it. And that way I can flex it up with the forklift and just triple check my rear bump stop clearances before I go finishing off this bump stop. Because obviously with the rear wheel arch just here, there's not really any room for error in terms of getting the heights wrong. So I just want to double check that before I go through and put those rear bumps in. And then I can start mocking up sway bars and we can call the suspension done. All right, so that's it. Wheels are on, shocks on for the first time. I'm just going to jack it up and cut these poles, and then I can hopefully push it over there. Pretty keen. This is obviously a big moment. Hopefully it all works out. When we put on the forklift, flex it up, and none of my tacks break. All right, so what do you reckon? I got the body on the other day in my lunch break. One of the boys gave me a hand to sort of drop it on with the forklift, and it's finally sitting on its own weight, wheels, cab on, you know, motor and boxes in, and it looks like a finished car. Unfortunately, it's not. Obviously, we've got a long way to go, but it looks sick like this. So now I'm just gonna jump on the forklift, flex it up and check these rear quarter clearances here with the wheels. Once I've sort of, you know, sussed out a few measurements so I can make sure that the tires don't hit the doors here, I'll go ahead and put the rear bump stops in. I've got other few things to do. Very front body mounts, very rear body mounts have also got to be whacked on, and take a few measurements for the fuel tank and a few other things like that. And then I can pull the body back off. So I'll jump on the forklift and we'll flex it up, eh? All right, so I just jumped off the forklift. I've already had a quick walk around. It's looking really good. The rear shocks are maxed out because obviously there's no resistance in the forelink, there's just a few bushes, but the Heims are sort of letting it do its thing. In the front, the radius arms that I've got tacked in there, they're still resisting it a little bit, and obviously picking it up with the front, there's not enough weight on the front to sort of fully articulate it. So at the moment, there's still 70 mils more of down travel in the front to go. But once I put sway bars in the front and rear, honestly, it'll probably end up about this high when the front and rear are maxed out. There was only a couple of little clearance issues that I'll have to sort out. My rear bump stop points, I've already got this rear bump stop mount sort of tacked in here, but you can see how close this slider will be to this. So I'll have to relocate this guy. I might end up just putting him under the chassis instead, sort of like the front. That's why I sort of wanted to do this check here. But on the other side, the main thing we wanted to look at was this. So how's that for placement, hey? It's just scrubbing. Obviously it's fully tucked up in the guard there, and then it's just scrubbing on the back. So if we just roll this, lip in a little bit, we should be sweet. I'm gonna do a quarter chop down here, so that won't be an issue. And then on the front here, it's just kissing. So if we can just roll that lip in a little bit, we should be sweet. And then up in here, there's obviously, surprising amount of room up in there. You can sort of see in from here how much it's sort of tucking, and then when we put our new sheet metal inner guard in to cover in this box, it's just going to go up a little bit higher. It'll be just under the bolts here for the seat belt. So we should have ample room in here as well for the wheel. So pretty happy with that. Just got to sort out those rear bump stops, and I can take a few measurements for some other things. So now I'll probably just admire it for a little while because I think it looks sick like this. Then I'll get it off the forklift, jump underneath, do a few jobs, and I can probably call it a night, I reckon. So super stoked with how that's turned out, man. Looks great. All right, guys, that's it for tonight's video. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to keep up to date with any new content I release. And in the next video, we'll be sort of starting on the fuel tank and bar work sort of mounts on the front bar, rear bar, and the sliders. So keep an eye out for that. Thanks for watching.